Does this popular marine scent really stand out from the sea of offerings already present on the market? Let's find out. Hello, welcome back to Seldomly Often. I am Daniel. Today we're taking fragrances, and this is a practical review of Lorenzo Pazzaglia's Black Sea. These reviews are for fragrances I have a lot of experience with, multiple wears in many situations, and are meant to give you a general idea of what it feels to wear the fragrance. As per usual, I don't really like to go into details about notes and accords, as I don't think that they help the end user. I'd rather talk about the wear experience as a whole. Today, we're going to be again diving into the chaotic world of Lorenzo Pazzaglia, who is arguably one of his most popular fragrances, Black Sea. This fragrance is very well known in the fragrance community as being an incredibly potent, long-lasting marine scent. They usually house very strong reactions. This is actually one of my latest acquisitions from the Lorenzo Pazzaglia brand. I now have a total of 7 fragrances. I really like Lorenzo Pazzaglia, I really like his brand, I really like the attitude behind the brand. The very Italian Lorenzo Pazzaglia is sort of an improvised perfumer. He is actually a chef by trade and works in the restaurant run by him and his family. His perfume career really was secondary to his chef career, and he sort of fell into this almost casually. He basically got into perfumery, he started purchasing a ton of raw materials, sniffing them, and figured that he would put something together and see how it went. He literally started putting together perfumes in his basement, as most uber niche perfumers do. And by uber niche, I mean those brands that are pretty much run by one person, or at least started by one person. So you have the perfumer coming up with a product and the designs, putting them together, assembling the bottles, putting on the labels, and actually shipping out the products. He was initially showcasing his perfumes right there at the restaurant where he had various offerings. He would give his clients samples to get their reactions, and apparently he got really good reactions because he turned his perfume passion into a business. Lorenzo Pazzaglia, the guy himself, is really charismatic. I like his attitude. He is very humble, passionate, and really respects the high tiers of perfumery. He himself acknowledges that his approach is a little bit chaotic and a little bit messy, and he's still experimenting a lot. And when I think about Lorenzo Pazzaglia, the first thing that comes to mind is the word chaotic. And I already referenced and described Italian niche perfumery in my other reviews and first impression comparisons as chaotic. And I really mean that because houses like Lorenzo Pazzaglia, houses like Francesca Bianchi, and even more famous houses like the ones from Gualteri, Nasomatto, and Orto Parisi, most of these perfumes are definitely not as refined, as elegant, as well designed and thought out as your typical high-end French fragrance, perfumed by master perfumers with decades of experience. The fun thing about the Italian chaotic approach is that it's mostly fueled by passion, by experimentation, and by adaptability. And Italians are incredibly good at being creative with little means. Now, the flip side of this approach is that a lot of the fragrances from these brands are very low quality and messy. Very few become massive successes, and a lot of them kind of fall into that forgotten fog of weirdness. Lorenzo Pazzaglia is the perfect brand, in my opinion, to perfectly represent this fun, chaotic, and passionate approach, specifically because the guy doesn't really take himself too seriously. And even when you look at the presentation, everything is really fun and approachable. His scents are actually quite mass appealing despite being unusual in a way. They're all incredibly potent. He has potency, longevity, and projection as his core pillars. All of his fragrances are incredibly exciting, incredibly fun, and all very wow-inducing, and Black Sea definitely follows suit. When looking at reviews online on Fragrantica and Profumo, Black Sea is often compared to Mega Mare, both in strengths and projection, but also in scent profile. Now, I don't really agree per se, but it still has that same very unusual, very polarizing, very bold marine aspect to it. I actually don't think that the scent smells similar or wear in a similar way at all, but we're going to talk about this when covering the scent profile. All I can say is that to me, Black Sea really represents the ultimate rendition of a niche marine fragrance. And what I mean by this is that when you come from the designer realm and you're used to marine fragrances, you're usually thinking about something like Acqua di Parma by Armani, or even something like Light Blue Intense by Dolce & Gabbana. In those fragrances, yes, they have a little bit of a marine note to them, a little bit of a marine vibe, but when you transition to niche and you pick up something like this, or pick up something like Mega Mare, you are initially completely blown away by the power and that marine, very fishy, very funky rendition. And this one here to me is like the perfect entry level to that realm. Personally, I have a ton of marine scents. I really like them. I'm a huge fan. And when I ultimately got to Black Sea, after sampling a lot of niche marine scents, I was kind of underwhelmed. And not because this is a bad fragrance whatsoever or it's lacking anything. It's just that it's a little bit generic. It's a little bit your typical marine niche fragrance. So I wasn't surprised. I was kind of hoping that this would be a little bit more of a unique take on the genre. But before talking about the scent profile, as per usual, let's cover the presentation. The look and feel of Lorenzo Pazzaglia's bottles is very, very unique. No other fragrance on the market has this sort of look. The bottles are this shiny black lacquered finish. The caps for all of his fragrances are these heavy metal pebbles. I really like the style. They have this owl engraving on top, which is his logo. Actually, I think that the owl engraving is relatively new. I have one fragrance, which is Arctic Sea, which does not have the owl engraving. So I'm not really sure if it was like a previous release or maybe it was just a previous bottle. I'm not really sure. I actually like the smooth pebble look, but I guess he wants to preserve the brand, so he added the owl also here. The caps slide onto the bottle with a very simple friction-based action. There's no click, there's no magnets. Incredibly simple and straightforward. The bottle itself, and this is common with other Lorenzo Pazzaglia fragrances, feels a little bit cheap, meaning that under this coat of shiny lacquer here, you can really see the seams of the mold for the bottle, and it just feels like a part's been bought that has been sort of repurposed in a creative way to make it look unique. The labeling for these fragrances is actually very good in quality. The sticker here is very well attached and it feels thick and well made. The art style for the fragrance is up to debate. I don't really like the art style. It does really embrace the fun aspect of the fragrance brand itself, but it doesn't really feel thought out. It feels a little bit cheap. Now, in the case of Black Sea, the background for the label is a very simple blue, but on other fragrances, we have these, I don't know, they look like printed stickers. It feels a little bit messy. It doesn't really bother me that much because Lorenzo Pazzaglia is that kind of person. But if this was any other brand, I would probably be shouting out that this kind of looks like a clone brand with a not very defined brand identity. The atomizers for the Lorenzo Pazzaglia fragrances are good but not great. They serve a purpose. They're not those beautiful pressurized dispersive atomizers, but hey, I can't complain. They work great. Let's give it a couple sprays. Yeah, this scent is incredibly potent. I wore it as my scent of the day, worked out, even showered, and I still could smell the dry down. So these two new sprays will probably carry all the way down to the morning. All of the Lorenzo Pazzaglia fragrances are extract de parfum, incredibly dense, incredibly potent. I seem to remember that I've read somewhere, or maybe I heard in an interview, that Black Sea is a 40% extract concentration. So that's very, very impressive. I have to say that one cool thing about Lorenzo Pazzaglia is that he offers other formats. I think he also offers a 28 ml, which is kind of unusual, but the bottle is super cute. And actually that format is perfect if you have a lot of fragrances, if you have a lot of bottles, and given the potency of this thing, you don't really need many sprays. Price-wise, the Lorenzo Pazzaglia fragrances are actually very, very fair in my opinion. 50 ml of this stuff runs, I think, 145 euros in Europe, which is very, very good, especially given how potent these things are and how unique they are. In the US, I'm not really sure. They have to go through an import process, and if it's anything like the Nasomatto, you might be paying a little bit more premium. That being said, I've never seen these fragrances offered at a discounter, so you might end up paying retail, which sometimes is a lot more than other more expensive popular brands, especially when at discounted price. Overall, I think that the Lorenzo Pazzaglia bottles look fairly unique, especially on the shelf with other fragrances. They're incredibly recognizable. Yes, the brand is a little bit lacking identity, but it's fun. It doesn't take itself seriously. It feels niche, it feels artistic, it feels put together in a basement, which adds charm to everything. All right, time to talk about the scent profile for Black Sea. What does this smell like? As I mentioned in my intro, a lot of reviews compare this to Orto Parisi's Mega Mare and to Profumum Roma's Acqua di Sale. And although I do not necessarily agree on that statement, it kind of falls into the same sort of category. And that category is the very dense, deep marine scent. Now, Profumum Roma's Acqua di Sale is dense, this because it's a very strong, dense fragrance, but it doesn't really smell this. It doesn't really carry the density that this or Mega Mare does. Mega Mare, on the other hand, is a very transitioning, very evolving narrative fragrance, which this is not. So if the scent profile is kind of similar to those two, this wears in a completely different way. It's way more predictable, way more linear, and way more unsurprising in a way. To put it simply, this to me smells like every other marine scent put into a blender, mixed together, and basically you get this as a result. So it has character and characteristics of a lot of other marine scents, but it doesn't really have any of its own. I actually feel that Lorenzo Pazzaglia's own other offerings from the Sea line, because the Sea line is a big line of fragrances which all have a very defined characteristic. I feel that the other fragrances from the line are way more characterful and way more unique. We have Sexy, which is a beautiful, summery, floral, fresh, citric marine scent, which is a very easy wear, very mass appealing. I have a review up on my channel about that. Then we have Arctic Sea, which I also own, which is kind of like this, but it has a lot more character in the fact that it has a mentholated aspect. It really represents in a good way cold water, cold air, and it's much more unique than this. This is, again, it's kind of your average sea scent, and it's completely mind-blowing, especially if you're coming from a designer realm. But if you have a lot of experiences with marine scents, if you have tried a lot of marine scents, this kind of falls short on the surprising factor. The opening for this fragrance is dominated by an incredibly detectable, very overpowering marine smell, very salty, and paired with that marine smell, you get a lot of greenery. The greenery in here is actually methyl liquor, and it smells remarkably similar to the opening of Acqua di by Profumum Roma, and actually it smells similar to the opening of Mega Mare. Mega Mare and this have this very airy, very fresh, very watery surface level smell. The green notes, which are present throughout the wear, but especially in the opening, are very balsamic, very medicinal, very mentholated. They give the sea imagery that the scent conveys, which is actually very realistic and well done. This fresh, airy feeling, it's almost like this wind which is covering the waves and kind of brings this saltiness to your face. The marine salty aspect of the scent can come across a little bit synthetic and overbearing. I think that there's a ton of cologne in here, maybe a ton of ambroxan, but it smells a little bit artificial, smells a little bit chemical. Overall, I'm overanalyzing because the initial blast that you get from this scent is very photorealistic, and it really gives you the image of this rough sea. And the name Black Sea is actually very fitting because this is not a sunny day at the beach type of fragrance. It doesn't have that vibe. It doesn't have a very fresh summery vibe. It's very much darker, denser. It feels like you're looking out to the sea, maybe from a pier, because you're getting blasted by this salty wind. The water is dark, is wavy, it's very not inviting. It feels rough, it feels primal. There's cloud cover, so everything is dark and gloomy. The water feels really uninviting, it feels cold. And this is a perfect representation of that idea, the ocean in the winter. And it's actually quite different from other scents that have the same sort of imagery, like Oud Mineral by Tom Ford. That is much more designery, and it has a strong woody component, which kind of alludes to driftwood in a way. Tom Ford's Eau de Mineral is actually a lot more wearable than Black Sea. It has this underlying mass appealingness which really cuts through the edginess. Black Sea is completely unapologetic. There's nothing sweet about it. It's very, very rough. This fragrance, especially compared to the likes of something like Mega Mare, does not really transition at all. The only thing that changes from the opening to the dry down is that you lose a lot of those green balsamics, which get replaced by a very subtle muskiness. Basically, the core of the scent, the core body of the scent, the main aspect of the scent is that marine note, which is that cologne and ambroxan. Those two notes alone are insanely potent and long-lasting and are the main culprits for the insane longevity and projection that the scent has. The chemical synthetic aspect of this fragrance is what makes the scent profile very harsh. It can be almost headache-inducing, and if you spray too much, paradoxically, you will stop smelling it because your nose gets completely overflooded with these aroma chemicals, which to me at least really has a consequence of making me anosmic to this particular fragrance. Other than the very vivid sea imagery that I get from this fragrance, I'm not really getting much narration or storytelling. Lorenzo Pazzaglia and his fragrances are actually not known to be those kinds of scents. He really aims for a wow effect He really aims for a fun wear experience, a very exciting wear experience, and this to me hits on all those fronts. When talking practicalities, marine scents of this type can be very polarizing because on one side, this is very versatile, both in density and seasonal wearability, but also in general use case and adaptability. But unfortunately, this all comes down to taste, environment, and if you like the scent profile. And I speak about environment because, as you may know, I live in the mountains of Switzerland, and wearing marine fragrances for me is actually quite difficult because they feel alien. They don't feel at home here. So despite owning a lot of marine fragrances, I barely wear them just because they're so foreign and people are not used to that sort of smell. On the flip side, if you live more in a coastal area where this sort of smell is a lot more embedded into the scenery, you can probably pull these off on a daily basis and be absolutely fine. But back to the listing of practicalities for this, let's start out with the performance for Black Sea. Longevity and projection for the thing are actually insane, as I mentioned. On skin, you get easily 12 plus hours of wear. On clothes, the scent is basically eternal. You have to really wash them multiple times to get it out. The projection on this, especially upon initial sprays, is massive. It's room filling. It's typical of these sort of marine synthetic scents. The cologne in here, the ambroxan, really pushes off the skin. It's insanely loud. 2 sprays are all you need because, again, otherwise you almost get anosmic. It almost is overbearing. It will clog up your nose and it will be choking to everyone around you. I feel that this aspect of this fragrance was clearly engineered in based on the success of Mega Mare. Mega Mare, unfortunately, is one of those fragrances that is mostly known for its potency, and a lot of people buy it for that because they like the idea of having a massively nuclear fragrance. So I think that Lorenzo Pazzaglia wanted to capitalize on that hype, and he really built it into Black Sea as well. As far as use case, I feel that this is a pretty casual scent and it's perfect for day-to-day activities, especially during the daytime. I have worn this to the office. It wasn't really offensive. No one really questioned it, but I could smell it around me. And I think that, again, maybe due to the fact that I'm living in the mountains of Switzerland, this came across as a little bit foreign or alien. That being said, I don't think that the scent profile is necessarily elegant. I really don't feel that any of the Lorenzo Pazzaglia fragrances come across as elegant per se. They're just too bold. They're just too in your face. There's zero subtlety. They're very fun. They're very exciting. And that doesn't really translate to elegance in my head. I'm not saying you can't wear this on a night out, because if you dress accordingly, if you're very confident, I think that the contrast that this provides can actually be quite interesting. Demographics wise, Lorenzo Pazzaglia fragrances clearly target a more youthful audience. Again, they're very bold, they're very in your face, there's no subtlety, they're very fun and exciting scents, and Black Sea is definitely one of those. Gender wise, I do feel that this fragrance is absolutely unisex given the abstract nature of the scent profile. That being said, I feel that most external people would probably deem this a little bit more masculine given the salty, marine-y, kind of funky nature of it. A woman could easily pull this off, but you have to, again, be very much into marine, strong fragrances. Okay, we're at that section of the video where I give you a few options for the reviewed fragrance. In this case, for Lorenzo Pazzaglia's Black Sea, I really wanted to focus on the sea aspect. The options I chose to showcase bring a little bit more character and interestingness to the marine sort of scent profile. And honestly, I like these a lot more than Lorenzo Pazzaglia's Black Sea just because of that character. The first fragrance I want to showcase is actually Acqua di Parma by Profumum Roma. I have a full review up for this fragrance. To me, this is the ultimate, the most elegant marine scent out there. It's the most wearable, it's the most pleasant while still being very, very strong and photorealistic. This is not a pretty scent. This is not a smell good scent. It's a very realistic rendition of the sea. It's a little bit brighter than the Lorenzo Pazzaglia. It's a little bit more wearable in my opinion. It's a little bit more mass appealing. There's a beautiful mirthful note in here, similarly to the Lorenzo Pazzaglia one. But the way it's rendered here, it's a lot more natural, it's a lot more herbaceous, it's a lot more realistic and credible. This scent, although very powerful and long lasting, is actually much more subtle and more wearable than Black Sea. And this is one of the aspects which makes this a lot more mass appealing and easy to digest. Although not a complex fragrance by any means, it doesn't really transition much or evolve much. This to me is pretty much the ultimate rendition of a photorealistic sea marine scent. My second option to Lorenzo Pazzaglia's Black Sea is actually Zoologist Seahorse. This is a very particular scent because first of all, it doesn't contain any cologne, at least according to Victor Wong, the creator of Zoologist. And It smells incredibly different from any other sea or marine scent because it really focuses on the greens. The greens in here are very unique, very special. There's an incredibly strong fennel note, which is both very watery, very refreshing, but at the same time, it has a little bit of edginess typical of fennel, which kind of reminds me a little bit of licorice. The scent is very friendly, is very airy, it's very summery in a way. It really depicts the seahorse environment beautifully. It kind of reminds me of, or rather, it doesn't really remind me, but it gives me imagery of Finding Nemo, the Disney movie. It's so nice, it's so polite, it's so quiet in a way. It's almost like looking through the sea water and seeing little fishes moving around the coral reef. It's so relaxing. I really like the scent. I really like wearing it. I got this at the tail end of summer, so I really haven't put a ton of wears in, but I really do enjoy this, and I have been trying to experience it even though it's winter. My third and final option to Lorenzo Pazzaglia's Black Sea is actually one of the weirdest and most different marine scents in my collection. We're talking about Electimuss Black Caviar. Electimuss is a weird English brand that I actually really like. I recently got a discovery set, and I have to say that a lot of the fragrances in there are really to my liking. I currently own this, and I own Cupid's Kiss by Julien Rasquinet. They're both exceptionally good fragrances. Black Caviar is a marine scent by all means because it has salty notes to it. It doesn't really smell like caviar. It doesn't really smell like fish. It's more like kind of like a designer-ish fragrance. It has very strong designer vibes, but very well done, with a little bit of an edgy marine component to it. It's so unique, it's so polarizing, it's incredibly long-lasting. There's something about this which I really can't put my finger on. It's incredibly addicting. I love wearing this. It's surprisingly mass appealing, and to the average nose, especially when smelled in the air, this doesn't really come across as a marine fragrance. It's kind of like an edgy adult, very sophisticated type of designer fragrance. Again, I keep going back to that designer denomination. I'm not really sure why, because this does not smell like your average designer at all. It's very high quality. It smells high quality. It smells incredibly put together and well designed. There's something mass appealing and likable about this scent that makes it an incredibly easy wear. This is a beautiful, elegant, well put together scent that can be worn in pretty much every situation, office to evening. Although extremely expensive, I really suggest you check out the house of Electimuss. I've been really positively surprised. I really like the house. Pretty much every one of their offerings is really interesting. But back to Black Sea for my final overview and recommendations. I have to say that Lorenzo Pazzaglia's Black Sea is pretty much the perfect entry to marine niche perfumery. It has a very exciting scent profile. It's very fun. It's very potent and long lasting. This is exactly the type of perfume that you want when you first get into niche, when you want to really elevate the quality aspect from a designer. You will be blown away by the potency, by the boldness, by the fun factor of this fragrance. Now, if you're a little bit more experienced in perfumery, and specifically in niche perfumery, you might have smelled this scent profile before, so it's a little bit unsurprising on that front. My final recommendation for Lorenzo Pazzaglia's Black Sea is a strong sample first. You really need to understand if a strong, funky marine saltiness is for you, and if you actually could pull this off and wear it on a day-to-day basis. It's not for everyone. You really need to like this sort of very photorealistic ocean aspect of it. As a first approach with the brand, I would definitely go with Black Sea because it's, again, very wow-inducing and you get a taste of what's to come. As per Lorenzo Pazzaglia's brand in general, I really do feel that everyone should get their nose on it because it's fun, it's creative, it's chaotic. It has a very passionate, humble vibe to it. I really applaud this type of perfumery. I really applaud Lorenzo Pazzaglia, and I can't wait to get more from the brand. If you like this type of content, if you like my approach to video, feel free to subscribe. It always helps the channel and it's massively appreciated. If you want to interact with me, leave a comment, suggestion, opinion, or anything else down below. I always reply and I always keep the conversation open. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for watching. It's never taken for granted. As per usual, many more videos coming up. See you in the next one. Cheers.